It began with silence, not the silence that derives from peace, but the silence which yells louder than words ever could. Christine sat on that sofa, concealing years of pain, while Kody, arms folded, eyes hard pressed, refused to acknowledge the woman who had stood by his side for more than 2 decades. You could sense it in the room. The air was heavy with truth at last, breaking through the cracks, and right there in front of the cameras. She spoke it. I don't wish to be married to Kody anymore. That time, that was history being created on Sister Wives. Hey friends, welcome back. I'm Aria, and this is TLC Next Reveal. If you're new here, do make sure you hit that subscribe button because we do not hold back. And if you've been watching this family from the start, I want to hear from you in the comments. What moment made you realize it was all coming undone? Today's tale is not simply a retelling, it's a reckoning, a tale of control, masquerading as unity about women who lived too long in a system that was never designed to love them back equally, about finally saying no. This installment doesn't merely provide us with drama, it hands us the truth bare raw. You're going to hear how Christine reclaimed her power, how Janelle gained clarity, and how Mary was left behind in the shadows of a love that had already died. So pour yourself a drink, settle in, because we're about to wade straight into the actual cracks of this so-called plural marriage, and what really cost the women who lived it when Sister Wives premiered it felt like we were being taken in on a secret. This huge, bold experiment in love, faith, and family for women, one man a dozen, plus children, and they said it was all about choice, about a kind of love that refused to fit into straight lines. The show attempted to market to us the image of a happy, plural, functional marriage. Yes, there were fights, but at that time, the message was loud and clear. This was a family founded on shared values, shared parenting, shared love. But let's get real. That was the image, and the image began to crack in the most recent seasons, and you can sense it. The warmth is gone. The communication is frayed. There are no shared dinners, no loud, chaotic scenes of togetherness, just one-on-one conversations filled with tension, silence, and the kind of passive-aggressive statements that say so much more than the words themselves. And slowly, piece by piece, it became clear this wasn't a united family anymore. This was a system, and Robin, whether she intended to or hadn't, become the focal point of it. The infamous so-called favorite wife story was no longer simply rumor, it was playing out before our eyes. Kody was by her side. The other wives, they were receiving scraps of time, focus, and emotional investment. Christine noticed first, the pattern, felt the change. She would speak about how decisions were being made without her, how Kody pushed aside her concerns, how he ceased to appear, not just physically, but emotionally. He wasn't picking her anymore. He wasn't putting their kids first. And over time, that hole expanded. It wasn't a bad phase. It was a awakening. Janelle, always the more independent one, began to string those dots together too. She had endured space from Kody for years, but Christine's suffering struck something deep inside her. It made her doubt things she had long accepted. In the meantime, Robin continued to say she wanted the family to be complete. But to Christine and Janelle, it didn't want to be about unity anymore. It felt more like control, like they were meant to stay silent, go along, and forfeit their own happiness for a man who'd already made his decision. And Christine, she found herself wondering if love was ever supposed to ache this badly, if being quiet really was the best thing to do. You could kind of see the moment Christine let go emotionally of Kody, and when it had passed, there was no return. It wasn't boisterous, it wasn't theatrical, it was soft. It was years of being overlooked, finally resolving to clarity, and it occurred right there on television when she looked at him and stated, "I don't want to be married to Kody any longer." There wasn't yelling, there was just truth, calm, assertive, and thoroughly done for years. Christine had fulfilled the role she believed she was required to. She raised children, smiled through disappointment, swallowed her own desires, and continued trying to make it work. But painfully slowly, she came to realize she was the only one trying. Kody wasn't just missing, he was distant. There were times when he wouldn't be intimate, when he made it obvious that the romance was dead and not due to a fight, but due to him simply not being interested any longer. And he told her that bluntly, like she should just accept the love was gone and keep the family alive anyway. That is not a marriage, that's emotional abandonment. And Christine had been holding on, hoping for a long time, but everything inside her was beginning to break. She could see what the future looked like if she stayed, and it was lonely. She'd already spent so many nights alone, so many holidays, where it felt like she and her kids were an afterthought, and the burden of always being the one to compromise, it had become too heavy. Then something changed. We saw it. She began to pack up the house, not with anger, not with drama, just factually, like someone who finally had an idea of what she had to do. She placed labels on boxes, she folded blankets, she wrote lists. It wasn't so much about leaving, it was about taking back herself. There was also that defining moment when she said to Kody, he could not just walk in and pretend like things hadn't changed. She said to him, the door to the bedroom was locked, that he no longer had access to her. It was one of the first times we witnessed Christine choosing herself, not the ideal, not the religion, not the image, but herself. This wasn't some rash decision. It was long overdue, and she didn't simply walk away from a man. She walked away from being invisible. Christine leaving didn't simply shake the family. It cracked the entire foundation they'd based their lives on, and the aftermath was raw, uncomfortable, and very revealing. Kody didn't respond with sadness or humility. He didn't inquire as to how she was feeling or what he might have done differently. No. He responded with anger, and not just any anger, the kind that conceals something deeper, hurt pride perhaps, but mostly a refusal to take any accountability. He stood there nearly stunned, as if he couldn't believe Christine actually held out for so long. He had figured she would just stay silent and fall into line. But now that she was actually leaving, he twisted it into betrayal. He said she never attempted that she wasn't loyal, but the audience witnessed what loyalty actually did. Christine had been loyal for years to the family, to the kids, to the ideal. But Kody had mixed up loyalty with submission, and once Christine asserted herself, it revealed the cracks in the whole dynamic. And then there was Robin. Her response was one of the most discussed segments of the aftermath. She cried, she mourned on the surface. It appeared to be heartbreak, but many fans couldn't help but wonder. Was it true sadness, or was she scared? Scared that the framework of control, the tiered pyramid stacked where she appeared to rest at the apex, was beginning to dismantle a part Robin had constantly been projected as the peacemaker. But when the balance shifted, her tears didn't come with solutions or empathy. They came with fear of losing what she'd quietly gained: Kody's attention, protection, and priority. And yet, in the middle of all this storm, there was Christine grieving, yes, but also calm, grounded, at peace in a way we hadn't seen from her in years. She was no longer explaining herself, no longer trying to prove her worth to a man who had long ago stopped seeing her. She was walking into something unfamiliar, but it was hers. Fans came out in support of her. Like never before, she was a symbol of quiet resistance, of a woman finally opting for happiness over endurance. And each time she smiled through the sadness, each time she looked straight into the camera and stood in her truth, you could feel it. This was the start of her real life. Janelle was always the quiet one, steady, practical to the point of fault for years. She kept her head down, busied with her kids, the family budget, the day-to-day grind. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room, But she was the one keeping a lot of it together, and for a long time, that was enough. But then something changed. It was subtle at first. Little comments, small expressions, hesitation when Kody would speak, like he assumed automatic agreement. Then there were the actual turning points conversations, where Janelle began nodding in agreement. One of the most poignant moments when she told point blank that she didn't feel as though she was a part of a working marriage. That sentence hit like a thunderclap. It was quiet, positive, calm, but there was no question in her voice. She wasn't asking anymore. She was declaring, and fans across the board felt it. Janelle wasn't faking anymore. Seeing Christine walk out had awakened something in her. Not jealousy, not competition, but clarity. Christine's decision had laid bare how unequal things were getting, and Janelle was seeing it too. The emotional distance, the lopsided priorities, the way Kody would show up, only when it was convenient to him or his ego. She had always strived to maintain peace, to be the voice of reason. But when peace becomes silence and silence becomes suppression, eventually even the quietest person begins to speak out. Her loyalty was starting to wane, not to the concept of family, and definitely not Kody, but to herself, and particularly to her children, observing her fiercely defend her sons when Kody insisted on blind obedience. That was a turning point. She was not prepared to leave her kids to sacrifice a failing marriage. She stood firm even if it meant standing alone still. You could sense her struggling with it. Janelle isn't spontaneous. She did not make emotional entrances or dramatic statements. She thought about it slowly, but you could sense it brewing, the awareness that things were not working, that they hadn't worked for a very long time. And more significantly, that she was worth more than being tolerated. She was worth being seen, to be heard, to be valued. By the time she began to use the word separation, it was obvious Janelle wasn't lost. She was waking up and she wasn't going back. Mary's story differs from the others in several ways. It's been the loneliest of all. While Christine, Janelle, and even Robin had their share of growth, change, and emotional reckoning, Mary's journey has been one of a painful, slow erosion. And let's be real, this was not something which occurred overnight. The cracks in her marriage were long before Christine chose to leave or Janelle began to speak her truth. Mary's heart had been gradually shattering. For years, the catfish situation, the betrayal which shook her whole world, was a defining moment for Mary. It was meant to be a wake-up call. But rather than being greeted with support, empathy, or understanding, Mary was left alone. It wasn't only the catfish itself that broke her trust. It was Kody's response, his lack of interest in her suffering. His refusal to recognize the extent of her pain left Mary emotionally adrift, and it wasn't only the catfish experience, it was the way Kody kept drifting further and further away. Gradually, the woman who had been his initial wife was placed in a mute, choking corner of the family, craving a love and acceptance that never arrived. There were times when you could notice Mary holding on to a version of Kody that no longer existed. It was not that she was unaware of the truth of their relationship, she knew, but she kept holding on to the vision of what they had once had, a love and bond that now felt like a distant memory. She'd bring up memories past, attempting to reignite that flame, attempting to remind him of who they once were. But the answers were lukewarm, always distant. Kody had checked out ages ago. He wasn't there for her, not the way she needed him to be, and the silence, oh, the silence, it became deafening. There were moments of rejection so subtle, so cold, that Mary couldn't help but feel invisible. She'd express her feelings, try to reach Kody, but it was like she was talking to a wall. The words remained unacknowledged, her presence unappreciated. It wasn't merely physical distance, it was emotional abandonment. Ultimately, when Mary finally made up her mind to leave, or at least to step back, It was like her leaving reflected what had been occurring within her for years, quietly resigned without fanfare. There was no exiting stage. Left, there didn't have to be. Her lack of presence had already been experienced long before she physically distanced herself. Mary was no longer merely a wife in Kody's life. She had become a specter within her own marriage, and as devastating as it was, it seemed like the only escape for her was to quietly vanish just as her relationship with Kody had. As we come to the third act of this epic, it's apparent the three women, Christine, Janelle, and Mary, have taken their own roads toward independence, and each of them has done it in their own way, according to the special challenges they experienced within the family dynamic. Christine, the very first one to break free at last, acknowledged her value. She walked away from a life in which she was always diminished, opting instead to put her happiness and her children first above all else for her. It was about taking back control, making the decision to move forward even when it hurt her. She taught us all what it is like to break free from the chains of a dictating and dismissive relationship. Her choice was a strong act of self-love, even if it did not come without its difficulty. Janelle, on the other hand, made her approach more quietly. But no less strongly with the passage of time her loyalty turned. She came to see that she could no longer keep putting her own happiness on hold for the benefit of a family that had long since fallen out of support for her. The way she needed her choice was based on strength, and though it wasn't as explosive as Christine's, it was equally meaningful. Janelle's path to independence wasn't about making a dramatic entrance. It was about choosing herself, her children, and her future Mary. Though lonely and sometimes neglected, finally broke. When she had spent years being emotionally neglected, she too walked away. Her departure was subtle but no less significant. It wasn't merely about leaving a man. It was about leaving behind a version of herself. She had been kept in a poisonous cycle. Marie's path to autonomy was not about drama. It was about tranquility, healing, and choosing to be free from being in the continual emotional haze which had previously enveloped her. And then there is Kody left over, bewildered and defensive. He is now encircled by walls of his own construction. The man who once had authority over a plural family, who had all of the power, now finds himself alone in his defensive posture, cannot comprehend why all the pieces fell into place. He's lost the women who were to be his support system, but he's too deeply invested in his own pride to acknowledge responsibility. He's been reduced to questioning everything, but still too obstinate to acknowledge where he went wrong. The family as we knew it gone, and perhaps it was never quite there to start with what appeared to be a united front. A mutual dedication to the lifestyle has fallen apart piece by piece. The walls Kody constructed have kept everyone out, even those who were closest to him. But for Christine, Janelle, and Mary, this isn't the end, it's a new beginning, one filled with the potential for growth, healing, and peace. They've escaped the emotional shackles that held them back, and they're entering a future where they can define themselves on their own terms. In the end, it's about freedom, truth, and the type of healing that only happens when you finally choose yourself.